When it launched, it was obviously, I was anxious, I was nervous. Once it launched, it's a big like sort of weight off your shoulder. Like, we've finally done this.
You aren't even fully aware that what you're doing at that moment is actually going to be the ledger that's going to live for many, many, many years to come.
After weeks went by, I felt reassured, that it's working.
And I think when we realized that, then we could finally enjoy, give each other high fives, pop open a beer.
I thought it was something that everyone was asking for.
It was designed very well.
I think it's a shame that it didn't went live on mainnet, but now we have Xahau.
It's been in development since 2020, as far as I remember.
Roughly 4 years ago, Richard Holland and I were discussing what smart contracts would look like. We realized that if we would take the existing technology, being the XRP ledger protocol, which is fast and cheap, and we would combine it with certain features we could add, we could probably build what we believe is a superior approach to smart contracts.
I work primarily on the hooks amendment for the XRP ledger, which is, broadly speaking, a smart contract amendment to add smart contract functionality to the XRP ledger. I've been working on that for about 2 years now.
So by the time we were ready to allow developers to test, to play with it, to turn it into amendment, we also realized that the amount of security audits required to get it to the point where you would trust this technology to be released to $1 billion network, we actually needed a network where people could use it with real value to show that it works. And we realized that that network would be a different network. It wouldn't be a testnet, because if it's a testnet, you don't use it with real value. If you don't use it with real value, there's a high probability that people won't even do the things that are required to identify potential issues.
The more connected we are, the more different we are too. So, to try and find a solution from one place and just force fit it somewhere else, it just doesn't work.
If it doesn't make it mainnet, maybe some other way. And this other way sort of happened.
And that was really the start of what Xahau is today.
Hooks is definitely superior to most EVM smart contracts.
With the EVM smart contracts, you basically install a piece of software as its own address on the blockchain. So if you want to interact with it, you have to send something to it and then it can reply.
Where hooks differs from Ethereum virtual machine type smart contracts is that when a payment comes in, or a check create comes in, or a offer create transaction comes in, you get to execute code before the transaction is applied. And then you can also opt to execute code after the transaction is applied.
The way we implement it closely resembles business logic. It's an on-chain rule engine. It's a global decentralized rule engine.
When we think about a new proposal, we have sort of fields that need to go into it and sort of logic that needs to occur. With hooks, we can do that very fast.
So you can build as a Lego. You can build one small hook, and then you can use extra hook, and that's hooks can trigger other hooks, and it's basically possibilities endless.
You have to comply with governments. So hooks allow us to be always in the right side.
Technology is going so fast that law needs to keep up with it.
The biggest threat that we're seeing with smart contract today is something called a reentrancy attack, where a contract calls another contract that calls the first contract again. In hooks, that's not possible because it only goes one way. It can't call.
We do have a testnet running now for hooks in JavaScript.
There are way more JavaScript developers than Solidity, for example. So it's not needed. You don't need to know C++ to actually write a hook.
People just can start and build it.
We had two different audits on hooks. So we had an early audit, and then we had a later audit just before the launch on sort of the balance rewards and the import. But that passed.
We started this audit even before it became Xahau. So I started on the hooks amendment.
The purpose of an audit is actually to go down into the code, into the very core of the blockchain technology, and figure out, is there anything in this network that somehow can be exploited?
When we audit stuff, we like to start with a threat model because everyone's different. Everyone have a different perception of threat. Like Xahau, if you're building a layer 1 network, you have different threats. What about someone else running a node? Can you trust them, etc.? So we like to start there to understand what the builder's perception of threat is.
What's more important than the actual report is that you realize what you didn't look at, that you realize what you can improve.
I don't see any real need to worry about Xahau because it builds on very proven technology already, so it's very safe.
You'll find different businesses have different ways to govern their organization. So we realized we needed more flexibility. So we separated the next ledger voting, basically, the consensus component, from what we call the governance game, which is the way on-ledger voting and on-ledger accountability happens.
There is like a different layer for the tables. There is layer 1 tables, and there are a few members there. And then each table can be a group of other tables, basically, or other members.
We designed it as what you could picture as a round table with 20 seats. These are like the first layer of governance seats. And these seats can vote on things that the network allows them to vote on. So that could be, for example, the inflationary percentage of the network.
I think we have one of the better records in terms of when a new amendment comes out, and the speed in which the network updates is extremely fast.
Every member can vote for the hooks which are going to be installed on the table, and they can also vote for members in and who they want to vote out.
You don't have to submit an application. What you need to do is convince everyone on the governance board to like you or to vote for you. So it's really sort of just whipping them together. You would obviously have to present something to show that what you want is valuable, that you're committed, that you're going to be here for a long time, you know, that you're going to be on time with voting and stuff like that.
At the end of the day, it's simply, do other people who are already in the governance game think that you're a useful addition?
And since Xahau is a smart contract enabled network, they can make their own rules. If they want their employees to vote on something, or if they want certain board members to vote on something, or if they want all citizens in a country to vote on something, that's all possible.
URI tokens is like new NFTs.
URI tokens are pretty interesting.
I always hated NFTs. Basically what it is, it's a receipt that you on a pointer. It's just like a DNS name.
When you work in with URI tokens, it's much easier to get information from network.
We had registration NFTs and we had lease NFTs, and all of these things weren't their own little object. They were in pages of other. It was complicated.
With URI token, if you know token, you just can get this information from network with just one request.
There was a sense of Evernode was a good idea, hooks was a good idea. You're banking on other people believing that too, and therefore the circumstances would exist for this project to exist.
When you start a blockchain, there is this initial group of people who will have to run the initial state of the software, basically.
You have to sort of have a whip. Somebody's got to be, you know, corralling everyone and sort of talking to each different person and relaying that information back.
Even in a situation where a blockchain becomes fully trustless, there's still this initial situation where people who trust each other decide to kickstart the network, the ecosystem.
It was super exciting to be a part of. I didn't really participate in designing the network itself, but just mostly participating in discussions.
I immediately told them, let me know what I can do and I will be very supportive.
When I started in blockchain in 2016, I created my own token, and I thought that was really awesome. And then we looked sort of at these blockchains that were sort of starting up, and I always thought to myself, that would be a cool thing to accomplish one day. And so when I got the opportunity, I couldn't say no. I like this quote, and it goes sort of like, once a man realizes he's a part of something bigger, he can accomplish anything.
It's a really difficult project to explain because it's not like almost everything else out there. It is a way of creating bespoke blockchains from the internet.
Things that Evernote can do, I think, are uniquely suited to use cases outside of crypto, right? So what we call middleman be gone, being able to do Uber without Uber in the middle, booking.com without booking.com in the middle, all that sort of stuff. Whatever Hooks doesn't do, Evernote does.
It's a platform that we have been building, integrating blockchain for ownership, identity, and peer-to-peer payments. But I think it's the interoperable way of 3D experiences that interact with each other.
First of all, we're an explorer. We show all the things on the ledger, we expose on the ledger. So all the new features which on the Xahau, we just want to make sure we can show them nicely and easy way people understand what is going on.
If we see hooks, you have to understand which company did build it. And for example, if someone wants to send a transaction, it's good to understand which hooks will be triggered and why, what it will be like results, like outcome before you send it.
People can build different things, but our thing is just to show it easily.
I specify in quality control, so an amendment sort of gets proposed and gets written, and then I make sure that that amendment is tested properly. I also am a full stack engineer, so I do work with sort of some of the front-facing applications. So, you know, we have sort of the back end, the Xahau Explorer and stuff, and then I, you know, work on the sort of applications that the consumers would use.
The InFTF is actually short for the Inclusive Financial Technology Foundation. It's a foundation where the mission is to help unbanked, underserved communities have equal access to financial services.
My job is developing solutions and also be the Spanish link to any organization or company that needs help in the blockchain industry. Something bigger I'm building right now is a donation app for NGOs that you are able to donate. You receive an NFT as reward, and also you are able to subscribe because I'm using a hook that other person has already created so others can use.
We are not the panacea for all problems. We have a very specific skill set. We have a very specific ability, and that's where we focus on. We don't want to be everything for everybody.
Right now, we're protecting people from sending money to scams in wallets, like the Saman wallet. We're also doing it in the XRPL cluster and Xahau cluster middleware, where the data from our efforts are propagated. And if somebody is trying to send a transaction to an account we know for sure is bad, then the middleware, the server, actually just blocks the transaction from ever being submitted using Xahau. And if we can move this on the chain, then people can opt in to do it on an account level. So they can opt in adding a hook that blocks an outgoing transaction if the recipient is bad.
People underestimate the need for some of those basic things like if you get a transaction you don't want and you reject it, it never enters the ledger. That's incredibly powerful and really useful and necessary.
We are not a vendor to the organizations implementing Xahau or any other blockchain that we promote. We help them learn the technology, we help them develop the first iterations, and then it's their code, it's their software, it's their solution to run. With the Cooperative Bank of Oromia in Ethiopia, we have helped develop a solution. It's not effortless to initiate a project like that, but when they realized how much money they could save in cross-border transactions, that actually their customers would get more money of the savings, then it was a no-brainer, I think, to go forward with it.
It allows their diaspora to actually send money cheaply and legally.
Initially, we're going to start with Europe as a pilot, you could say, for inward remittances. One of our great developers, Daniel Seidentopf, has been helping them learn the basics about the blockchain. So they're building their own X app. They're also building custom hooks to help with compliance and security.
Scott Chamberlain has this great quote, and he says, "The blockchain is really useful for a group of people who need to trust each other, who don't trust each other." So that's where, when I think of like an idea or an application, I always think back to that.
The ecosystem does need marketers. It does need people who can help promote it. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Initially, we will probably need more people that actually build stuff on Xahau, and they will attract their own audience.
With hooks, we are able to make things that today we are not even thinking about them. So the best use case, I think, is not reached already. We are going to see it in the next years.
My favorite project right now, I think, is actually immersive. The ability or the idea to take, my phone and go into the grocery store and tap to pay and watch the money come out of a smart contract that I built on a network that I helped launch is probably one of the top ideas.
But you don't have to spend money. You can always just do some nice tweets, retweet or repost content regarding Xahau and spread the word.
I think in the next years we are going to see an app store of hooks where people are going to send their hooks and others are going to apply to their accounts, and they are going to see the benefits of using Xahau.
Involve more people in the network, make sure it's growing, not only by some institutions, but by people, use cases, more scenarios. I think it's very important.
A really interesting project is the voucher application, or the voucher hook. I like to call it destinationless payments, but basically I can deposit money into the hook and I can give someone else a QR code, and they can then scan that QR code and pull the money out of the hook into their account. And that actually really gets into a really good use case for businesses wanting to onboard people.
One of the solutions we're working with Taltech, with their energy department, is to see how can we create energy markets, energy solutions, which allow people the small person to actually make a business out of generating electricity, some of it for self-consumption, some of it for consumption by industry around them.
I am sure that lots of problems that humanity focuses on or faces will be resolved by technology.
And we are receiving more ideas and new implementations that I already am using in my use cases.
No incentive is the best incentive. I always never believed that was true, but I never understood how much a little incentive, like just the power of it, the self-organizing capacity that comes from saying, here's a piece of software, here's a token, it distributes the token according to these rules, see what happens. Well, what happens is the community organizes itself.
So instead of looking at Xahau as a Web3 network where you bring value or you extract value from the network, let's try to grow the network to provide real solutions for people, for businesses, and transform the way we look at our business process and interaction with end users and customers and clients, and democratize the way we interact with each other.
how close to my nose?
That's perfect, all right? And if you can do the same thing with